Hello everybody, how are you doing? It's Monday the 15th of June and this is episode 76 of the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, Ben Eagle. Before we start, I just want to give a shout out to the Rock and Roll Farming podcast and my fellow farming podcaster Will Evans, who released a really fantastic episode last week which featured livestock vets Nevaratnam Parthiban and Claire Whittle. The episode focused on racism, prejudice, diversity and inclusivity within the farming community and what can be done to improve things. I know that on a personal level that I could still do a lot more to improve diversity on this podcast, and it's made me think about how this issue works on so many levels really. So thank you to Claire, Thebe and Will for making that podcast episode last week, and if you haven't already listened to it, check out Rock and Roll Farming on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, libsyn.com or wherever else you listen to your podcasts. On Meet the Farmers today, I'll be speaking to the current chair of Young Farmers, Dewi Parry, and we'll also be playing this week's round of Guess the Crop. First though, let's take a look at the news stories from the past week.
In the news.
Last week, the House of Lords began to scrutinise the Agriculture Bill, and perhaps as expected, there was plenty of concern raised, especially when it came to the proposed so-called Parish Amendment, which failed to pass in the Commons, leaving the door open to food imports that wouldn't meet domestic standards. And there was also disappointment in the lack of detail as to how environmental standards would be maintained after Brexit. The crossbencher Lord Krebs described the bill as leaving as many questions as it provides answers. The House of Lords will next go through the bill line by line at committee stage, when there are likely to be many more amendments proposed. Rain gauges up and down the country have been filled over the past week, some more than others, and I'm sure this was a welcome relief to many arable farmers in the run-up to Harvest 2020, and livestock farmers wanting some grass growth, although I reckon many will say it hasn't nearly met what is needed after the dry couple of months that we've had. A report authored by Sustain, Pesticide Action Network UK and trade expert Emily Lydgate has said that the country's pesticide standards could be radically reduced in upcoming trade deals with the US, Australia and India, which would, they argue, threaten public health and the environment. Finally, it's looking likely that standing straw prices could be 15 to 20% up on last year's values because of the challenging weather we've been having. Auctioneers and values said that anyone who can produce a quality product should be in a strong position. There's a challenge if I ever heard one. That is the news for now.
In the news.
It's now time for our main feature of the show, and today we're focusing on Young Farmers, a feature that puts the spotlight on a younger farmer in the industry or a member of one of the many Young Farmers clubs around the country. This week I'm speaking to the current chair of Young Farmers, Dewi Parry.
Meet the young farmer. Meet the young farmer.
So today I'm speaking to Dewi Parry, who is the current chair of the National Federation of Young Farmers Clubs. He lives in North Wales on his family's sheep and beef farm, which is home to the oldest flock of badger-faced Welsh mountain sheep, and he also has his own flock of blue-faced Leicesters. By day, he is an assistant manager of a timber and builders merchants. Dewi, welcome to the show, and thanks for coming on. How are you doing?
It's an interesting time, isn't it? Obviously, it's not the year I expected as chairman of Young Farmers, but it's very informative, and I've had to really up my technological game.
We're in the middle of the lockdown, and your term is going to be, I'm guessing, dominated by it at the moment. Do you feel like you've drawn the short straw being chair of Young Farmers this year?
There are obviously moments where I looked at the calendar that I had penciled in for this year and realised that I'm not getting to do the things I expected to do.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't call it the short straw. It's just different. It's an opportunity for me to do things that no other chairman has ever done. I've been to more meetings already in a third of a term than every other chairman has ever been to in a whole term. Just because obviously I don't have to travel to them. I can do 2 or 3 a night.
Yeah.
So I get to meet an awful lot more people. I just don't get to leave home and see them. So from that point of view, it's disappointing. But also, a lot of if you're in a year of status quo in Young Farmers and everything was quite settled down, you'd obviously get to press a lot of flesh, go to a lot of YFC events, lots of shows. well, I'm not sure you'd actually get to do anything as exciting as this. This is difficult, but it's definitely exciting because YFC's never had to do this before. We've moved almost entirely online in the space of a couple of months, and everything is still going on. Governance is happening. Charitable objectives are being met up, and we're still volunteering. So obviously the competition side of it is slightly different and disappointing that we can't do everything that we've always done. And YFC is very welded to tradition, but sometimes it's good to have something to open your eyes to the fact that we don't have to do things the same way every year. For the last 4 decades, we can actually change and do things, and that's refreshing. So it's really good to be a part of that.
We had Ed Ford on the podcast a few years ago. I'm pretty sure he was chair three years ago or something like that. And he gave a bit of an insight. But from your point of view, what's involved in being the chair of Young Farmers?
I mean, obviously, when Ed was Young Farmers Chairman, as I fully expect to do, I expected to go up and down every corner of England and Wales, meeting as many members and as many counties as possible to seeing how everything be done and helping them out. And that's still what you try and do. You're trying to help out counties and members who need help up and down the country.
Yep.
Obviously, I'm having to do that virtually. I don't actually get to go to the events. But essentially, I think the job of the Young Farmers Chairman, it's not about you. It's about helping other people get their views forward, helping other people shape the movement, shape the organisation going forward in terms of what it wants to offer its members and what it wants to be perceived as in the wider general public as well. And I don't think it's the chairman's job to impress their own views on the organisation. It's about facilitating and being a catalyst for those views to be acted upon. And I think realistically, this year has actually given me a greater opportunity to do that than would usually be the case.
Does it take up a lot of your time?
It does take up most evenings of the week. But I fully expected that anyway. But I expect a lot of the time to be taken up driving to places. And actually, it's really refreshing that I can actually spend the time committed to it is actually spent talking to people rather than getting to them to talk to for much less time.
Yeah, that is a really good point, actually. Because personally as well, I found that I've gained so much time by just not being in the car so much.
Yeah, it's obviously I think a face-to-face meeting is obviously probably superior.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure the juice is worth the squeeze from the point of view of getting there. If you've got to go to Cornwall or Northumberland for a meeting, you're talking 4, 5, 6 hours in the car there and back. For a 2-hour meeting. You might as well have a 2.5-hour meeting over Zoom, and do away with the handshakes, I think.
I mean, you're 30 now. When did you join Young Farmers, and what are some of your early memories of being involved?
I was very late joining Young Farmers, in all honesty. I was 18, nearly 19, so it's 12 years ago. But yeah, you get an awful lot of members who are lifers. They start at 10 and they go through it all. But no, I was very much a late bloomer, so I came to a small club, obviously in rural North Wales. I think we only had about 12, 15 members on a good day, and they were probably struggling. So it's really good from that point of view. I got to get involved really quickly. So obviously if you join a massive club, it's very hard to be an incredibly active member of it in terms of the running of the club. But I got that opportunity very early, and I think from there it just grew on that I wanted to be involved in running Young Farmers and making it easier for people to join, easier for people to enjoy themselves. Actually, it's more worthwhile in the end. So I've always said that the more you put into it, the more you get back. And I was really lucky from the point of view that I joined a small club that I got to give it back sooner than most would be able to.
Yeah, and tell me about how you got involved on that national scale and why you decided to do that.
I think it's really easy to criticise national Young Farmers from anyone's position in their county, but if they're not willing to get involved themselves and help, then they're part of the problem. So if you want something doing, you've got to do it yourself. So I was always willing to go to the meetings, and eventually there comes a point where, unless you're willing to volunteer, step up yourself, then I feel that you're probably part of the problem. It's time you moved on. But I felt I still had something to give to Young Farmers, so I was willing to do it, and thankfully they voted me in. I was very, very privileged and honoured to have the position.
Tell me about your part of North Wales.
It's obviously very hilly, it's very green, it's very wet. So there's obviously not a lot of arable farming going on. It's all it's mainly sheep farming, and circular cows. Our farm's actually probably 2 miles from the coast, so it's relatively low lying.
Okay.
And we were a dairy unit until 1998, but we're just not big enough to have coped as a dairy unit, so we moved into.
That's exactly the same as us here.
Yeah, so like we couldn't compete with that, so we changed the herd to suckler herd and up the numbers of sheep, because that's what was easiest to keep on the land, I suppose.
Yeah. And I mean, you've got the oldest flock of badger-faced Welsh Mountains on the farm. Tell
In
me about
North
them.
Wales, I should probably caveat that.
In
But
North Wales, in North Wales,
yeah,
okay.
I'll leave that in the introduction because it sounds more swish. No, so my mother's from Norfolk originally, and she moved over here, met my father, and she decided to pick a hobby sheep to take to sheep shows in the early 80s.
Yeah.
And so the Badgerface Society, I think, was only formed in 1977. And so she got her first badger faces in 1981, and we've kept them ever since.
Hmm.
Yeah, they're essentially just a recessive gene of the Welsh Mountain breed. So they've got badger face markings, but they've been bred pure now for the best part of 40 years officially.
Brilliant.
And no, they're definitely characters. So, but they're growing in popularity up and down the country because they're relatively easy to keep, and
Yeah.
obviously they're quite interesting to look at as well.
Yeah. I mean, and you also keep blue-faced Leicesters, which are slightly better known. I bet you're missing the shows this year. Where do you normally show your sheep?
We try and do a couple of local shows. The Blueface Leicesters have also got a breed progeny show, and the main show we go to is the Royal Welsh, which obviously a massive loss to do, showing everywhere because it is probably the biggest show in Europe, if not the world, especially for pedigree sheep. So it's really sad that we don't. It's always exciting that you get to go to the first show of the year and you get to see what everyone else has got, and you're always on the lookout for the next best thing in terms of like potential ram lambs you could buy, aren't you? Really, that's why you go to the shows. It's the top window for everyone. And obviously everyone's going to have to try and move that onto social media and try and shop that way. But obviously then you're not really judging the sheep, you're judging the best photographer, which is very different.
I mean, I don't know about you. It's one of the, especially as we move into June and then it's July, and it's one of the strange things about this year is just none of these events happening.
Yeah, I think obviously in farming, when it first hit, if you were in sheep, you were lambing. If you're in arable, you're panicking about getting everything planted. And then obviously everything settles down in June before harvest starts. And you're thinking that's when you go to shows. And that's what we're missing. And I think it's going to hit us harder now that we're realizing we're in the middle of it all. And that's our release in the middle of summer is not going to be there. And that it's a really social aspect of summer, isn't it? You go to these agriculture shows, small or large, and you meet people probably for the only time of the year, and it's a really good catch up, and that is going to be missed sorely up and down the country.
Yeah, especially dare I say for young farmers.
Obviously, I mean, it's the crescendo for most counties' year is their county show, or obviously county rallies are often incorporated into their county shows, and it's a great shop window to show YFC off to the general public, which again, I mean, YFCs have been doing great things for the general public and their community, but obviously it's not as good a shop window, or obviously as large a shop window as we're usually used to.
Yeah, I mean, I've only ever been to the Royal Welsh once, which was absolutely amazing. But that is a massive shop window for YFC, and YFC does big things there, don't they?
Oh, it's 4 days of competitions on a stage which is dedicated to it. They get really high profile exposure in the horticulture tent, the cattle ring, the main ring, and even like the shearing shed and the sheep lines. It's a huge part of like people that you can't often sell the gospel of YFC to get to see it that week, and it will be a big loss that we probably won't realize just how important it is until we get to have a year without it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we'll see what happens with the lockdown and COVID as we go through the year. But obviously you've still got quite a long time of your term left. What are some of your aspirations for the year ahead?
I'd really like for young farmers to be in a place where it can get going and start thriving again by the time my year ends. So obviously I'm due to step down in February next year.
Yeah.
And obviously it'd be very dependent on restrictions of how many people can gather as to whether we can have very many national meetings of YFC. But the heart and soul of YFC is the clubs. And so long as we can get clubs up and running and competing with like adequate guidance support from us at NFYFC, then I'll be quite happy standing down that we know that we're in a solid place to go forward, and that we've come through this, and we're probably stronger as a result of it, because we can't meet week in, week out. But obviously absence makes the heart grow fonder, and we're now realizing what we're missing. So hopefully people will come back even more enthused to play an active part, because young farmers is a strange thing, because everybody takes it for granted for many years until they realize that their time's running out,
Yeah.
where they either just step away or they really want to step up. So I think this will make people realize that they do have a limited time and they really want to contribute 100%. So no, I that's my hope, is that we'll be able to start meeting again, and we'll come out of it and grow the membership ever stronger.
Coming back down to earth, you work at a builder's merchant day to day. How has that been impacted by the lockdown?
We were shut for a month, just because we could have stayed open, because it's homeware. It could be classed as homeware.
Yeah.
However, we didn't feel that we were essential enough to remain open throughout it all. So we shut for a month and then set up new procedures in terms of how people can actually access the business. So it's like a call and collect. So you have to, my time spent on the phone has increased exponentially. So whereas usually you deal with human beings in person, you're now essentially entirely on the phone,
Yeah.
which is hard, because you're there on the phone and another phone line is ringing all day long. I think it's frustrating for us, it's frustrating for customers, but I think the world is slowly adapting to realize that you can't do things as you used to be able to,
Yeah.
only a few short months ago. So people are used to queuing, people are used to waiting. But yeah, it's difficult. It's twice the work for probably half the business, just because you can't process as many people.
Mm-hmm. What's your perception generally of other businesses in the area?
I mean, it depends an awful lot upon what you do. Obviously, farmers haven't stopped. A great deal of contractors won't have stopped, because the work still needs to be done. And obviously, it's so dependent on seasonality, the weather, which obviously hasn't helped us either, because it's been eternal drought ever since lockdown started,
Absolutely.
really, hasn't it? But no, I think it's going to be hard for everybody. But I think we need to put things into context and rationalize it, in that agriculture produces a product that we're always going to need. And from that point of view, every business connected to the rural economy has also got a better chance of surviving this than if you had a non-essential retail business in the middle of a city. You are going to be struggling through this time, going
Yeah.
like, even not just through this time, but coming out of this time is going to be really, really difficult for everybody in that
Mm.
situation. So I think we should obviously be mindful of the fact that we're quite lucky, in that we do get to go outdoors, we do get to continue trading. It's difficult. It's a changed world. It's not as easy as it used to be. But also we need to make the best of the situation. So we need to take the public on board with British agriculture, I think, going forward. We need people to buy British produce. And if we are seen as being moaning for a situation which is far worse for actually the consumer than it is for the producer, then I don't think that does us any favours going forward
Mm.
regarding trade deals and public opinion.
Because in some ways, I mean, this could be a massive opportunity for British ag.
Absolutely, it's been lovely to see so many people reconnecting. Like, probably even for the first time, it's not even reconnecting; it's connecting for the first time to local farm shops, local butchers,
Yeah.
local fruit and veg deliveries. I think that understanding of where your food comes from and shorter supply chains, I hope that's here to stay. And I actually, it's more than a hope. I expect that to be here to stay, and we need to build on that to make sure that everybody is mindful that it's actually much safer, much easier, and it benefits everybody if people shop locally and support local businesses and local food producers. We don't need to depend purely on markets. If we can actually help the little guy down the road, then I think ultimately society will be all the better.
Let's skip ahead a few years for you personally. Where you think you're going? Where do you see yourself in a few years' time? And in terms of sort of what you've taken away from young farmers and your time on the farm and your work currently, where do you see yourself?
I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I think it's very difficult to make concrete goals unless you know exactly what you want to do. I've
Yeah.
always been open-minded to improving myself, I think. So if you see an opportunity that you think that you'll enjoy, take it. Has always been um,
Yeah.
my mantra, I suppose. So the reason I've done these things in YFC is because the opportunity was there, and I'd only regret it if I didn't do it. It probably means that you can't do other things at the same time either. But I think the skills you learn through YFC, and I've been lucky enough to take a lot more opportunities than some people do get to in YFC, will set me up for later life to do whatever I want to, really. It
Absolutely.
opens doors into politics, into business, into any form of the agricultural sector. And I just really need to, I haven't picked a path yet. But whatever that may be, I feel that I'm much more prepared for it, having had this time helping out, well, being a part of YFC, than if I hadn't done it. So I don't know where I'll be, but I'm quite happy that it'll be a more interesting place than I would have been had I not done what I've done these last few years.
Well, Dewey, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been great to talk to you. And I wish you the best of luck for the rest of your term, as strange as it is. But it sounds like you're making the absolute most of it. And similarly, all the best for the future as well.
Thank you very much, Ben. Take care.
You too.
Meet the young farmer. Meet the young farmer.
Dewi Parry. To find out more about young farmers, just visit nfyfc.org.uk. Before we go, it's time to play Guess the Crop.
Time to guess the crop. Just tell me what the type of crop is.
Yes, this is Guess the Crop, the ongoing farm quiz that asks you to guess the crop from 3 clues and message me your answer through Twitter or Instagram at mtf_podcast or by emailing thinkingcountry@gmail.com. At the end of the year, the person with the most correct answers will be sent a special Meet the Farmers mystery prize. Your 3 clues this week are: number 1, it's a fibre crop used to make a number of textile products. Number 2, the plant is a shrub native to tropical and subtropical areas, including the Americas, Egypt and India. Number 3, in the US, it is usually measured in bales. So message me your answer at mtf_podcast or send an email to thinkingcountry@gmail.com.
Time to guess the crop. Just tell me what the type of crop is.
That's it for this week. I realise it's a slightly shorter episode, but thank you very much for listening. Thanks also to my guest today, Dewi Parry, for coming on the show, and to the show supporters, the Mercer Family Charitable Foundation. Next week, I'll be speaking to rural surveyor, environmental commentator, and general countryside disruptor, Rob York. For now, though, have a great week, and I'll look forward to you joining me next time on Meet the Farmers.